Hi, fourth grade. Welcome back. Today we were working on the Bill of Rights with lesson one. We're going to do our introduction video and chapters 1 and 2 today. As we work through the Bill of Rights, today we are going to learn to understand the Bill of Rights and the importance of their creation to the United States citizens. We know we will be successful when we understand why the Bill of Rights was created for United States citizens. We have lots of vocabulary in this section as we're introducing something new. So, our first vocabulary word is rights. So, these are people's freedoms as guaranteed by law. And we'll learn more about the different rights that we have as United States citizens. But these are our freedoms, these are what we're allowed to have. The next word is colonies. These are lands settled and ruled by people from another country on behalf of the government of their country. Our next word is delegates. And these are people chosen to represent others at a meeting. So I might delegate someone to sit in and take notes for a meeting, and that would be something that you delegate out. The next word is constitution. It's a document that describes the basic laws and organization of a government. To amend is our next vocab word. Amend is to change or add to a legal document or law. So it's just making a changing, but it's the fancy way of saying it's how you're going to change it within the law. And then you have federal. It's relating to a form of government in which states are related under one overall power. So federal is our highest form of government, federal, state, and then local. So, federal for the United States would be all of the United States, whereas if we have state law, it would just be by Kansas, and then local would be just in Topeka or Shawnee County. Okay, so what does the Bill of Rights mean to me?
Is it true that the U.S. Constitution didn't always contain a Bill of Rights? Yes. Back in 1787, the writers of the Constitution talked about including a bill that would protect the rights of all American citizens. But then they decided against it. Luckily, the idea didn't end there. 11 of the 13 states had to approve the new Constitution. To make that happen, supporters had to promise to add a Bill of Rights as soon as the Constitution was approved. James Madison of Virginia took the lead in crafting the 10 constitutional amendments or changes that make up the U.S. Bill of Rights. They protect important rights and freedoms, including the right to express your opinions freely and the right to worship in any way you choose. The Bill of Rights became part of the Constitution on December 15, 1791. People still debate the meaning of some parts of the Bill of Rights, but everyone agrees it is the cornerstone of American freedom. To find out more about the Bill of Rights, read the book.
Okay, and so we broke it down that we're going to talk about the Bill of Rights first and then move into the Constitution. So, just as they said, our Constitution is our overall, we broke it down to talk about our Bill of Rights first because it's one section of the Constitution. So, the Bill of Rights. It's all about rights, chapter 1. So, what is in the United States Bill of Rights? Why was the idea of rights so important to America? To answer these questions, you need to know the story of how the United States became a country. So then you have Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Georgia here, and it says these three states approved the Bill of Rights almost 150 years after the other states. So this didn't even happen in one swift progress. Over here, our caption says this map shows what the United States looked like around 1790. There were only 13 states. Before becoming states, though, they were the original 13 colonies. So this is our section up here in the northeast part of the United States. There are our original 13 colonies. The land that is now the United States was first settled by groups of Native Americans. Thousands of years later, explorers from Europe arrived. They began claiming the land as their own. Settlers from Great Britain established 13 colonies, the ones we just showed you on the map. These colonies were along the eastern coast of what is now the United States. The people who lived in the colonies were called colonists. Our caption here says, in this painting, colonists meet the Nauset people. These Native Americans grew corn and beans in what is now Massachusetts. Many colonists came to start a new life. Some hoped to become rich. Other colonists came for religious freedom. At the time, people in Great Britain could be punished for having a different religion than the rest of the country and its king. And up here, our caption says, "This painting shows pilgrims leaving Plymouth, England, for their voyage to America. Of 102 settlers, nearly half died in their first winter in America." So, your rights that happened in Great Britain. With the exception of religion, the English colonists had individual rights when they lived in Great Britain. They had won rights long before in the year 1215. Why were those rights so important? Before 1215, British kings and queens could take people's land. They could also make them pay enormous taxes. They could even have people killed for no reason. King John did all of those things. But in 1215, powerful landowners forced the king to sign a document called the Magna Carta. This document said the king could no longer do whatever he wanted. He now needed permission from a council, which later became Parliament. The Magna Carta also gave people the right not to be imprisoned unlawfully. So they can't just decide to put someone in prison for no reason. It was that unlawfully. The rights of the English people kept growing. In 1689, Parliament convinced their king and queen to sign a Bill of Rights. This gave Parliament even more power to protect people's rights. The king and queen could no longer ignore Parliament's laws. This image shows King John signing the Magna Carta in 1215. He did not plan to follow the document. In 1216, King John died in a civil war. His son, Henry III, was forced to follow the laws in 1225. So then we have the rights in the United States. The colonists believed they should have the same rights as people living in Britain, but they had no voice in the British government. They had no say in how taxes were imposed. So the colonists refused to pay the taxes that the British government demanded. To punish the colonists, the king and parliament took away some of their rights. Parliament forced colonists to house British soldiers and closed Boston's port. The more the colonists protested, the stricter the British government became. So, what they're saying is that these people came over to the United States while they were coming from Britain. Britain's government was making their life more difficult. They were making them pay higher taxes. They would say, hey, you have to just let these British soldiers live with you. They were making everything way more difficult. So it says, even playing cards were taxed by the British. Colonists organized to oppose the Stamp Act in 1765. This British tax required colonists to buy a stamp for all printed materials. So they began making up these laws for people to pay more and made it very difficult for those that had traveled to the United States. The colonists decided to fight for their rights. They went to war with Great Britain in 1775. They declared their independence the next year. But now the Americans had no central government of their own. They had always been ruled by Britain. How would they run their new country? And up here in the caption, it says General George Washington was an important leader during the Revolutionary War. In this illustration, Washington leads his army at the Battle of Princeton in 1777. The Americans won the war in 1783. And here it says this engraving shows Philadelphia's Independence Hall as it was in 1776. Leaders met here to write the Bill of Rights. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were also signed here. So all of the really important documents for the United States. So here we are, chapter 2, running the United States. So at this point, we had come from Britain and people had come over, started claiming land, but then Britain was treating people poorly by making them pay a lot of money and having a lot of laws. So then the United States gained their independence. But now they're thinking, how do we decide to run this country? We no longer have a king that we're under or a parliament. So that's where we start to go from there. So the summer of 1787 was unbearably hot in Philadelphia. Flies and mosquitoes filled the air. The smells of sweat and animal waste wafted through the streets. Despite the heat, the new nation's leading men called a meeting. They would not be stopped from planning a new government. So here we have on a $100 bill, Independence Hall's clock reads 4:10. So The meeting called the Constitutional Convention began in May 1787. Each state, except Rhode Island, sent delegates or representatives to the convention. There were 55 delegates in attendance. The delegates wanted to create a constitution. This document would outline the laws and government of the new country. These delegates are known today as the founders of the United States. Many were already famous. George Washington had led the army against Britain in the fight for independence. Benjamin Franklin was an inventor and a political leader. And down here, our caption says this painting shows delegates at the Constitutional Convention, including George Washington holding his hat and Benjamin Franklin in the brown suit holding a cane. So you have George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. So then it says some delegates were not as well known. James Madison was an intelligent young man. Madison had helped write Virginia's Constitution. He had spent many hours thinking about the new country. He studied the governments of ancient Greece and Rome. Madison filled notebooks with his thoughts. Eager to get started, he arrived in Philadelphia well prepared. And here it says James Madison's portrait is on the $5,000 bill, which is no longer printed. That's why we don't see the $5,000 bills anymore. A new constitution at last. The delegates worked on the new constitution for 4 months. They decided to keep their meetings secret. They sealed the meetings rooms windows shut and posted guards. Imagine how hot it was inside. This was before air conditioning, way before. In this painting, George Washington addresses delegates at the Constitutional Convention. There, leaders created the kind of government that still leads the United States today. Page 19. During that time, the delegates had many arguments. They were able to come to agreement on most issues, but the question of individual rights remained unsettled. 5 days before the end of the Constitutional Convention, George Mason of Virginia asked to change or amend the new Constitution. He wanted Americans to have individual rights. Those rights included freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Mason asked for a separate Bill of Rights. Some delegates agreed with Mason, but most were impatient to finish. The group voted no to George Mason's suggestion. And up here, our caption says Virginia delegate George Mason had helped to write the Virginia Declaration of Rights. The Constitution was approved on September 15, 1787. It did not have a Bill of Rights. Mason and 2 other delegates were so angry they refused to sign it. The Constitution described the parts and duties of the government. It also contained rules for elections. The Constitution clearly defined the role of the federal government. We talked about that's the biggest government for the United States. It would cover all of the United States. And here it says 39 delegates signed the U.S. Constitution in 1787. You can see the 22 signatures listed there. Okay, the most modern city. In 1787, Philadelphia was the most modern city in the United States. Modern then was very different from today. People threw their trash into the streets. There were no toilets, only outhouses with holes in the ground. Cows, chickens, and pigs lived side by side with people. There was no air conditioning. If you were hot, you stayed that way until the weather changed. Why did the Constitutional Convention meet in Philadelphia? There were enough taverns, restaurants, and rooming houses to serve the large number of people traveling to the convention. Above all, the city was a symbol of hope for the new nation. It was where independence had been declared in 1776. Okay, so you have 2 journal questions today. Your first one is how did the United States come to be its own country? And number 2 is what is the importance of the Bill of Rights? So, what is the purpose of them? You may have to go back, reread, or re listen to parts of the story. But how did the United States come to be its own country? And what is the importance of the Bill of Rights? So, thank you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you soon.